As we have a quorum of 6 members, including one Teachta Dála, August Yellow we will commence the meeting. We are in public session. Okay, I wish to advise members about the usual in relation to the mobile phone. It interferes with the broadcast equipment and we mightn't get coverage in our office report. We have apologies from Senator Ned O'Sullivan and Deputy Catherine Murphy. I propose we go into private session to deal with a number of items. Is that agreed? Okay.
inside that. That's the, I don't acknowledge in English the preface. It's a nice, that's a bit of
Great stuff. Joe, we'll see you all the best.
When you go would you book for Wednesday week at 11:30 to 11:30 to
Resumed, we are now in public session. We will consider the topic community development of volunteering with representatives of Volunteer Ireland. I want to welcome the following witnesses to the meeting: Ms Yvonne McKenna, Chief Executive Officer; Ms Tricia Nolan, Manager, South Dublin County Volunteer Centre; Mr John Cotterell, Manager, Louth Volunteer Centre, and Volunteer Ireland Board Member on behalf of Volunteer Ireland. You're all very welcome here today and we appreciate your attendance. I wish to draw your attention to the fact that by virtue of Section 17(2)(l) of the Defamation Act 2009, witnesses are protected by absolute privilege in respect of the evidence they give to this committee. However, if you are directed by the committee to cease giving evidence in relation to a particular matter and to continue to do so, you are entitled thereafter only to a qualified privilege in respect of your evidence. You are directed that only evidence connected with the subject matter of these proceedings is to be given, and you are asked to respect the parliamentary practice to the effect that, where possible, you should not criticise or make charges against person or persons by entity or name or in any such way as to make him or her or it identifiable. I also wish to advise you that the opening statement and any other correspondence you provide to the committee may be published on the committee website after the conclusion of the meeting. Members are reminded of the long-standing parliamentary practice to the effect that they should not comment on, criticise or make charges against a person outside the Houses or an official name or official either by name or any way such to make him or her identifiable. I just want to say a few things before I call you to make a presentation. I think we're all here, more so than most, aware of volunteering and volunteerism, and it permeates through, I think, all of our different communities. And I think particularly at times of economic difficulties, I think that kind of volunteerism is much more visible, much more appreciated, and there's a bigger demand for that. I think as a race we have this sense of belonging. I mean, there isn't anyone that we don't know who isn't involved in an organisation, let it be a GA club or let it be a political party or the Red Cross or the IFA. So we as an Irish person have this huge sense of belonging, but also a huge contribution to give so many voluntary organisations. So I think in that aspect, we're looking forward to the exchange that we'll have with you this afternoon. Hopefully it will be productive. I've no doubt that it will be. Now I'm going to call on, is it Tricia's making the opening statement? Or Yvonne?
Yeah. Thanks very
okay,
much.
55 minutes.
Okay, I'll try and be a bit shorter than that. Well, good afternoon and thank you again for the positive response to our request to talk to you. My name is Yvonne McKenna, I'm the Chief Executive of Volunteer Ireland and I'm here together with Tricia Nolan and John Cotterell. Volunteer Ireland is the National Volunteer Development Agency and also a support body for local volunteer centres in Ireland and volunteering information services. We exist to increase awareness of volunteering, access to volunteering and quality in volunteering. And I suppose we're here to talk to you today because we see this as a crucial moment with respect to the supports that we give to volunteering in Ireland. It is the third time that we have spoken to this committee. The first time was in 2003, and on foot of that meeting there was an announcement of a package of measures, as they were called, to support volunteering. So it really was the beginning of a kind of strategic approach to supporting volunteering in Ireland through the development of volunteering infrastructure. We came to you again in 2009 designed to talk to you, I suppose, as the country was slipping further into recession, and to describe to you the impact that was having on volunteering and the importance of supporting volunteering through the recession. And I suppose we're here today again as a crucial moment, hopefully, as we turn the corner on the recession and come out of it, to seek your support, I suppose, with respect to continuing to support volunteering, but also to highlight some of the impact that the recession has had on supporting volunteering and the volunteering infrastructure. And you know, since the recession, we experienced an increase in the demand for volunteering roles, as you just pointed out, of almost 100%, and that has remained consistently high. We're still experiencing a lot of people who want to volunteer, you know, want to give to their community, and it could also be seeking to try and develop their employability skills, or seeking to make a positive change in their community. At the same time, the community and voluntary sector has obviously experienced significant cuts, and an increased demand for services. So in the context of that, we're trying to support community and voluntary organisations to involve volunteers and to be better at involving volunteers and be more creative about those volunteering roles. As volunteer infrastructure between ourselves and the volunteer centres, there have been near consistent cuts since 2009, and I suppose we're at a stage now where I think any further cuts will cause really unprecedented damage to the services that we can provide. And I suppose in one sense we're looking for your support on a little bit of a stay of execution, let's say, with respect to the cuts that are being provided. More importantly, we also want to seek your support. This committee has as I've outlined, has had a significant positive impact on supporting volunteering, and we're coming to you now to seek your support with respect to one issue, which is a policy for volunteering. The Department of Environment, Community and Local Government have committed to developing a policy that will support volunteering, and I suppose what we're trying to say from our perspective is that 2 years down the road, that policy hasn't yet been forthcoming, and we believe a national policy will provide some national, or we believe it should provide some national objectives against which the achievements of the volunteering infrastructure could be set and evaluated. So it's really in relation to those things that we're here to talk to you about today. We've obviously provided a submission in advance. And so what I might do now is hand you over to Trish Nolan to talk to you a little bit about what it is we do and the outcomes that we seek to have.
Okay, I suppose, as Yvonne said, I'm the manager of the South Dublin County Volunteer Centre. In times, I suppose, of ever-dwindling resources, in some ways it's incumbent on us to deliver what I call bang for our buck, particularly as we are in organisations that are in receipt of public funds. Yvonne has spoken to you about the funding issues that affect us as a network, but I suppose one of the things I want to talk about is about our value for money as a network. And so I'm going to highlight some of the outputs that we measure as a network of 21 volunteer centres and Volunteer Ireland, and then John will speak about some of the impacts that we can actually see, which are not as easy to measure. Over the last number of years, one of the main things that we've done as a national network has to be built from the ground up a national database for volunteering, which we called IVOL. We've done this at little or no cost to the Exchequer, and it is a database donated to us by a company called Salesforce, a corporate, who give it to us, and it's worth in excess of over 150,000 euros per annum in in-kind funding. We've built it as a searchable database for volunteering, and it allows potential volunteers to view opportunities to volunteer around them right down to their local town. It can be accessed on the website volunteer.ie, or you can look at it on any volunteer centre website. We've also, if you have time, you can download our smartphone app for volunteering called IVOL, which was developed by a volunteer from the IT in Tallaght. What IVOL allows us to do, as well as allowing potential volunteers to view opportunities to register with their local centre, it allows organisations to register online and register their volunteering opportunities. So it provides the match between volunteers and organisations. But what it also allows us to do, crucially, is to track trends and statistics in volunteering. And what I thought I might present is some of the kind of startling stats from 2013 that we've measured. In 2013, 14,953 new volunteers registered on IVOL for the first time, either through IVOL or through their local volunteer centre. These are all new volunteers who are registering for the first time. A further 2,500 volunteers from previous years re-engaged with centres, came back looking for more support and new opportunities to volunteer. So over 17,500 volunteers in total were supported across the network of centres. Of that, over 6,500 volunteer roles were filled, and this is volunteer roles that we know of. They're people who have actually come back to us and said, yes, I've started volunteering in this organisation doing this piece of work. A lot of the volunteers that we refer on to organisations start and we don't hear back from them because it's job done, I suppose, in many ways. One of the things that we are able to measure with volunteers who've started is the amount of hours they commit to volunteering. And in 2013, we recorded over 500,000 volunteer hours. Now, these are not cumulative hours. These are hours that are just recorded by volunteers who registered in 2013 and started volunteering in 2013. So we're not counting the volunteers who we started volunteering in 2012 and 11 and so on. That's the equivalent, if we, it's the international standard to measure a volunteer by the average industrial wage. And so if we multiply those 500,000 hours by the average industrial wage, what we have is the equivalent of over 11 million return on investment. And I suppose, just to note, the volunteering budget in Ireland is around 2 million for the infrastructure as a whole to support 21 centres and Volunteer Ireland, and yet we're giving back in one fell swoop over 11 million in volunteering hours. It's also the equivalent of 300 full-time workers that we would have to put in place to actually replace the volunteers that have begun volunteering. Startling enough, 71% of volunteers registered with us are under 35 years of age, and 62% who have come to us have never volunteered before. Another thing to note is that organisations obviously are supported by us and are registered on our database. In 2013, over 900 new organisations registered to volunteer, bringing the total amount of volunteers that we support across Ireland to over 7,000 organisations. And today, if you were to go onto IVOL, you would see over 3,000 active volunteer opportunities for potential volunteers to browse through. These are national statistics, and we can break these down into local statistics. So if anybody would like to find local statistics about volunteering trends in their county, we'd be happy to provide them. I suppose I just want to highlight this is only a small taste of what we measure, and it doesn't show the other work that we do also. We provide training and supports to not-for-profits around volunteer management and good practice. Sometimes we might say that it isn't always as difficult to get volunteers as it is to retain them in organisations. So a lot of the work we do at local level is to help organisations develop their capacity to retain volunteers in their work once they've started there. We work with corporates also to support them to volunteer as part of their corporate social responsibility programme, and Volunteer Ireland run a series of inspiration days to support corporates to volunteer. Local volunteer centres have taken on a role providing a Garda vetting service to local small not-for-profits that can't get access to Garda vetting themselves. Recently, we've been approached by the Department of Social Protection, and now we're providing vetting for all the CE programmes nationally, as well as providing vetting for small local organisations. I think there's in excess of 500 organisations been accessing Garda vetting through their local volunteer centre. We also run promotional events and campaigns around volunteering, including National Volunteering Week, local outreach programmes, the Ireland Involved Awards and other campaigns. And finally, we've developed and implement quality standards, not just for volunteer centres, but also a Q mark for volunteer involving organisations. I suppose in conclusion, it can be clearly seen for a very relatively small amount of money that's been invested in volunteering infrastructure that we return a great return on investment. And I'll hand you over to John, who's going to talk about the things that are not easily measurable, which is the impacts.
Thanks, Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Cotterell. I'm the manager of Louth Volunteer Centre. And what I want to do is just give you an example of maybe how one of your constituents might avail of the services of the Volunteer Centre, which is very pertinent with Jed here in Louth. So William, who's also mentioned in the case study at the back, he ran a jewellery business for years, but unfortunately he had to give up because he suffered a bout of depression, and he was referred to the Volunteer Centre by the HSC, which we are linked in with the occupational support therapists. And when we met William, he was saying to us at the Volunteer Centre that he didn't know there was an opportunity to volunteer. And when we sat down with him, we we actually just listened to where he was coming from, what his skills were, his interests. And that's the key role of the Volunteer Centre, that it makes it easier for people to volunteer. We connect people with opportunities based on what's suitable for them. And William didn't want to make a long-term commitment, so what we did actually starting off is that we got him to volunteer with an opportunity that we had called Lens a Hand photo exhibition. And Lens a Hand basically is capturing the spirit of volunteering in Louth. So we had lots of photos of different people in Louth volunteering, and the idea is that we showed them in different shopping centres to get people thinking about volunteering, seeing the smiles, and maybe inspire them to do something themselves. So that's the other key part of the Volunteer Centre. It's about selling it. People don't really see, it's the question, what's in it for me? And, as you know, probably listening to your constituents, there's so many people unemployed, people who've retired, people who are maybe not feeling part of the community. So we need to try and sell that, and that's a key role of the Volunteer Centre. Because it went so well with that volunteering, we ended up connecting William in with Action Against Addiction, which Jed is probably familiar with. It supports young people who suffer from addiction. They have a shop and they recycle. So William now is teaching young people skills around jewellery making, which was his business before he had to give it up. Speaking to William afterwards, just last week, he was telling me that what he gets now, because he was out of work for so long, he gets that sense of worth, that he's able to actually give something of his skills. But also, he's keeping busy and he's learning something himself. And it's because he hasn't got that much involvement with people. This is a great way just to meet people, have a bit of a laugh. And I think volunteering, that's the key of it, to actually feel connected to your community, that you feel part of it. And so that's the perspective of the volunteer. But I mean, there's also the impact of these volunteers like William on the community. For example, it's the older person who's looking forward to getting that weekly visit. It's the young child who gets that boost of confidence because they got the badge, in the Scouts. But these organisations, these community groups, cannot exist without volunteers. And so that's why the critical role of the volunteer centres and Volunteer Ireland, that we're actually trying to support that, to let people know about what's there, what's going on, and then when they actually volunteer, that we'll support the organisations to make sure that each person who volunteers feels that this organisation values my time and they stay with them and continue volunteering. So thank you very much. I'll pass you back to Yvonne. Just for,
I suppose, just by way of summing up, and it is just to highlight a little bit what John was saying, is just to remind ourselves of the true value of volunteering. I think John's given a great example of an individual already. And I know I'm quite aware that I'm speaking to the converted here. There isn't someone in this room who hasn't arrived where they are without the support of volunteers. But really, when we take a step back and we look at the impact of volunteering, volunteering is good for individual volunteers, for the recipients of volunteering, community and voluntary organisations, the sector, community and society. With respect to the recipients of volunteering, that's the people who are receiving direct services from volunteers, who are being entertained, so across the gambit, from literally from the most vulnerable in our society to the most invincible, and we're all recipients of volunteering, whether we know it or not. For volunteers themselves, volunteering provides an opportunity to express ourselves, to practice skills, to develop new ones, helps us on that journey either towards employment or out of employment, and is of course an important element of community development. What connects all volunteering, what is common across all volunteering, whether it's fundraising to developing a website to training a football team, it's your connection with other people. So volunteering is an opportunity for us to become part of something bigger than ourselves, and literally that is the meaning of life. That is what keeps us alive, is our connections to other people. With respect to community and voluntary organisations, I suppose the community and voluntary sector wouldn't exist without volunteers. Volunteers are really the research and development element of community and voluntary organisations. They allow us to provide more services, better services, and there's also certain roles that when volunteers take them on, there's really no comparison with the paid employee. And I suppose we're thinking that with respect to befriending or perhaps some of the advocacy services. It's also important to the community in which volunteering happens, and the extent to which communities have strong networks of volunteers or have high levels of volunteering makes those communities more questioning but also more equal. And I don't suppose we should forget the extent to which volunteers push it up to us, remind us of the kind of services that we're failing in our society and providing them for us as well. And lastly, with respect to the state, I mean, we know that volunteering, although we don't count volunteering in Ireland, we know that in the developed world, the value of volunteering is considered to be anything between 2 and 3% of GDP. That's a significant number for our country, but it's beyond that. It's the bits that we can't count, and I suppose it's not really radical anymore, nor outlandish to say that GDP is not the only measure of the wealth of a society. So I suppose just in conclusion, it is our belief that we should take volunteering seriously, and if we want to be serious, the way we do that is, I suppose, have a more strategic and structured approach to supporting volunteering. And in our mind, that is protecting what's already been built up, but also seeing a future for it with respect to a policy that will set national priorities and objectives that we can deliver on as well. So I'd like to thank you all for your time, and we're obviously available to take any questions or further comment if you like.
Great. Can I just ask a couple of questions myself? The first thing is, I would say in terms of volunteer centres, I presume by definition they're in urban areas. So how many volunteer centres are there?
There are
roughly.
There are 21 volunteer centres operating across 17 and a half counties. There was a policy to support volunteer centres that was introduced in 2009, which envisaged a situation whereby there would be a volunteer centre per county in Ireland, with the exception of Dublin, where they were per local authority area. Now, that policy, since it was introduced, has actually been on hold because of the economic situation. But essentially, the volunteer centres are both urban and rural, so they're in 17 and a half counties across the country.
How do you, for example, I'm just thinking of my own bailiwick in West Cork. Okay, it's about 120 miles from just outside of Cork City over to south West Kerry. And there's a huge amount of volunteerism, let it be in relation to sports, politics, different organisations. There are a huge amount. And in any one town,